Welcome to Brainish English Stories.
There was a girl who was very pretty and charming. Sometimes, fate makes these kinds of girls be born into families with not much money. She didn't have any money or fancy things, and nobody rich or famous wanted to marry her. So, she married a man who worked as a clerk in the government. She dressed simply because she couldn't afford fancy clothes, but she was unhappy. She felt like she should be living a better life. For women, it doesn't matter where you come from, it's all about being beautiful, graceful, and charming. These qualities can make even poor women just as important as rich ladies. Mathilde was always unhappy because she believed she was meant to have all the nice things in life. She didn't like her small, plain house, the old furniture, or the curtains. Other women wouldn't even notice these things, but they bothered her a lot. She even felt envious of the girl from Brittany who helped with the housework. Mathilde's imagination ran wild with dreams of luxurious palaces, fancy parties, and being admired by everyone. When she had dinner with her husband at their simple table, she couldn't help but think of elegant dinners, beautiful dishes, and charming conversations with important people. She had no fancy clothes or jewelry, and that's all she wanted. She wanted to make people admire her, envy her, and think she was charming. Mathilde had a friend from school who was rich, but she stopped visiting her because it made her feel sad. However, one evening, her husband came home excited and gave her an invitation card. He said, "Look, this is for you." She opened the envelope and found a card that said, "The Minister of Public Instruction and Madame Georges Ramponneau invite Mr. and Mrs. Loisel to a party at the Ministry's Palace on Monday, January 18th. Instead of being happy, Mathilde got angry when her husband gave her the invitation. She muttered, "What am I supposed to do with this?" Her husband hoped she would be excited, but she wasn't. He explained, "I thought you'd be happy. You never go out, and this is a great chance. I had to work hard to get this invitation. Everyone wants to go, and they're not inviting many clerks. All the important people will be there." Mathilde gave him an annoyed look and said impatiently, "What am I going to wear?" He hadn't thought about that. He said, "Wear the dress you wear to the theater. It looks nice to me." But Mathilde started crying. 2 big tears rolled down her cheeks. "What's wrong? Why are you crying?" he asked. She wiped her tears away and said calmly, "Nothing. It's just that I don't have a dress, so I can't go to the party. Give your invitation to a colleague whose wife has better clothes." Her husband was really upset. He said, "Come on, Mathilde. How much would it cost for a simple dress that you could wear on other occasions?" She thought for a moment, calculating and trying to figure out how much she could ask for without making him say no. "I'm not sure, but I think I could manage with 400 francs, she said hesitantly. He turned a bit pale because he was saving that exact amount to buy a gun and go hunting with his friends in the summer. They liked hunting birds on Sundays in Nanterre. But he agreed and said, "Okay, I'll give you 400 francs. Try to get a pretty dress." As the day of the party approached, Madame Loisel seemed sad, worried, and anxious. Her dress was ready, but she wasn't happy. One evening, her husband noticed and asked, "What's wrong? You've been acting strange for the last 3 days." She said, "It bothers me that I don't have any jewelry or ornaments to wear. I'll look very poor. I almost don't want to go." Her husband suggested, "You could wear real flowers. They're fashionable right now. You can get 2 or 3 beautiful roses for 10 francs. But she wasn't convinced. She said, "No, it's more embarrassing to look poor among rich women." Her husband exclaimed, "You're being silly. Go ask your friend, Madame Forestier, if you can borrow some jewelry. You're close enough to her for that." She got really happy and said, "You're right. I didn't think of that." The next day, she visited her friend and explained her problem. Madame Forestier went to her closet, got a big jewelry box, brought it back, opened it, and told Madame Loisel, "Pick whatever you like." First, she saw some bracelets, then a pearl necklace, and a beautiful gold cross from Venice with precious stones. She tried them on in front of the mirror but couldn't decide what to wear. She kept asking for more. "Do you have anything else?" she inquired. Madame Forestier then found a stunning diamond necklace in a black satin box. Madame Loisel's heart raced with desire. She put it around her neck, outside her high-necked dress, and felt overjoyed when she looked at herself in the mirror. With doubt in her voice, she asked, "Can I borrow just this, please?" Madame Forestier agreed, and they embraced. Madame Loisel kissed her friend with passion and left with her treasure. The night of the party came. Madame Loisel was a huge success. She was the prettiest woman there, elegant, graceful, smiling, and incredibly happy. All the men looked at her, asked her name, and wanted to meet her. Even the people from the government noticed her. She danced with joy and passion, lost in pleasure, forgetting everything in her happiness. She basked in the attention, admiration, and desires of those around her. This triumph was something every woman's heart finds incredibly sweet. She left the party around 4 in the morning. Her husband had been asleep since midnight in a small empty room with 3 other men whose wives were enjoying the party. He put her in a simple coat, which looked plain compared to her fancy party dress. She felt this and wanted to leave quickly so that the other women, wearing expensive fur coats, wouldn't notice her. Loisel tried to stop her, saying, "Wait a moment. It's cold outside. I'll call a taxi." But she didn't listen and hurried down the stairs. When they got to the street, they couldn't find a taxi and started looking for one, shouting after the drivers in the distance. They went towards the Seine River, feeling very cold and desperate. Finally, they found one of those old nighttime taxis that only come out in Paris after dark, as if they were ashamed to show their worn-out appearance during the day. The taxi took them back to their apartment on Rue de Martyrs. They climbed the stairs sadly. It was all over for her. As for him, he knew he had to be at the ministry by 10 in the morning. She took off her coat in front of the mirror to admire herself one last time. But then she cried out. The necklace from Madame Forestier was gone. Her husband, already half undressed, asked, "What's wrong with you?" She turned to him in distress. "I've lost Madame Forestier's necklace," she cried. He stood up, shocked. "What? How? That can't be." They searched her dress, coat, and pockets, but it was nowhere to be found. "Are you sure you had it when you left the party?" he asked. "Yes, I felt it in the entrance hall of the minister's house." "But if you dropped it in the street, we would have heard it fall." "It must be in the taxi." "Yes, probably." "Did you note the taxi's number?" "No, and you? Did you see it?" "No." They looked at each other, stunned. Finally, Loisel got dressed. "I'll walk back along the entire route to see if I can find it," he said. He left, and she sat on a chair in her party dress, too exhausted to go to bed, feeling hopeless, without any warmth, and with a blank mind. Her husband returned around 7 o'clock. He hadn't found anything. He went to the police, newspapers, and taxi companies, hoping to find any clue. She spent the entire day in constant fear and worry about the terrible situation. When Loisel came back that night, he looked tired and defeated. He hadn't found anything. He suggested, "You should write to your friend, saying that you broke the clasp of her necklace and that it's being fixed. This will give us more time." She wrote the letter as he instructed. After a week, they lost all hope. Loisel, who had aged significantly, said, "We need to figure out how to replace that necklace." The following day, they took the box that once held the necklace and went to the jeweler whose name was inside it. He checked his records. "It wasn't me, madam, who sold that necklace. I only provided the case," he explained. They went from one jeweler to another, searching for a necklace that matched the lost one. They felt miserable and ashamed. Finally, they found a string of diamonds at a shop in Palace Royal that looked very similar. It was worth 40,000 francs, but they could buy it for 36. They asked the jeweler to hold it for 3 more days. They agreed that if they found their lost necklace before the end of February, he would buy it back for 34,000 francs. Loisel had 18,000 francs from his father's inheritance and borrowed the rest. He borrowed 1,000 francs from one person, 500 from another, and so on. He gave notes, took on burdensome debts, and dealt with lenders of all kinds. He risked his entire future, signing notes, without knowing if he could repay them. Terrified by the hardships and misery ahead, he handed over 36,000 francs on the jeweler's counter to buy the new necklace. When Madame Loisel returned the necklace to Madame Forestier, her friend said coldly, "You should have returned it earlier, I might have needed it." Madame Forestier didn't open the case, as Madame Loisel had feared. If she had noticed the switch, it would have been a disaster. She might have accused Madame Loisel of theft. From then on, Madame Loisel experienced the harsh life of poverty. She faced it with unexpected bravery. They had to pay off that dreadful debt. They let go of their servant, changed their apartment, and rented a small attic under the roof. Madame Loisel learned the challenges of housework and kitchen duties. She washed greasy pots and pans, dried dirty laundry, and carried heavy buckets of water up and down the stairs. Dressed humbly, she shopped for groceries, bargaining and sometimes dealing with rudeness, carefully counting every coin she spent. Every month, they had to pay off some debts, repay others, and ask for extensions. Her husband worked at night, settling tradesmen's accounts and copying manuscripts for a few coins per page. This challenging life continued for 10 years. After a decade, they had paid off everything, including high interest rates and compound interest. Madame Loisel had aged. She looked like a tough, strong woman of modest means, with messy hair and rough hands. She spoke loudly while cleaning the floor with splashes of water. But sometimes, when her husband was at work, she sat by the window, remembering about that joyful evening long ago, the ball where she had been so beautiful and admired. She wondered what would have happened if she hadn't lost that necklace. Who knows? Life is unpredictable, and it can be greatly influenced by small things. One Sunday, while taking a walk in the Champs-Élysées to relax after a week of hard work, she saw a woman with a child. It was Madame Forestier, still young, beautiful, and charming. Madame Loisel felt compelled to speak to her. After all, she had paid off the debt. Why not tell her the truth now? She approached and said, "Hello, Jean." Madame Forestier, surprised to be addressed so familiarly by this plain-looking woman, didn't recognize her and said, "But, Madame, I don't know you. You must be mistaken." "No, I'm Mathilde Loisel." Her friend cried out, "Oh, my poor Mathilde! How you've changed!" "Yes, I've had a tough life since we last met, filled with poverty, all because of you." "Because of me? How? Do you remember the diamond necklace you lent me for the ministerial ball?" "Yes, what about it?" "Well, I lost it." "What do you mean?" "You returned it to me." "I returned a necklace exactly like it. It took us 10 years to pay for it. You can imagine how difficult it was for us, especially when we had nothing. But it's finally over, and I'm very relieved." Madame Forestier stopped in her tracks. "You're saying you bought a diamond necklace to replace mine?" "Yes." "You never noticed." They looked very similar. And she smiled, a proud and innocent smile at once. Madame Forestier, touched by this revelation, held Madame Loisel's hands. "Oh, my dear Mathilde! My necklace was fake. It was worth at most only 500 francs.